Howdy, and welcome to Be the Packet. Today, let's get you working with some actual Cisco Systems equipment. Well, kind of. We'll be using Cisco's Packet Tracer network simulation software. If you haven't yet downloaded and installed Packet Tracer, you can get it for free from Cisco's Networking Academy website at www.netacad.com. Packet Tracer is available for Linux, Mac, and Windows. If you don't have a Cisco login, you will need to create a free account. Networking Academy also offers online courses, many of them free. They even have one covering how to use Packet Tracer. What we'll be doing today will be fairly basic. I'll show you how to configure a small network like this one with 2 switches and 4 PCs. You'll connect the devices with cables, configure IP addresses where needed, and make sure the PCs can talk to each other over the network. In the process, I'll introduce you to some of the security and configuration steps that can be performed from the CLI or command line interface. This won't be an in-depth video. My intent is to help you get used to working with the CLI, how to navigate it, and use a small set of the available commands. So let's go ahead and get started. First, down here in the lower left corner, there are 2 rows of icons. The upper one gives you the class of equipment you can select, so we'll make sure the one all the way to the left is selected. That gives us network devices. Below it, the second one in is for switches. We're going to grab a couple of 2960 switches and drag them up into the workspace. And next we'll switch on the top row to end devices. And let's take 4 PCs and bring them up, 2 on each side. Okay, the next step is cabling. Cables are in the lightning bolt down here. And the only cable we're going to be concerned with for right now is this solid black line. That is a copper straight through cable. So click on it. Click the PC. To connect it, you just click the interface. And we want it fast Ethernet 0. Then to the switch, we can pick fast Ethernet 0/1. And we're going to cable all the PCs up from fast Ethernet 0 to the switch. Now we need to connect the 2 switches together. This is going to be a little bit different. Instead of going from a fast Ethernet port, we'll go from gigabit Ethernet 0/1 over to gigabit Ethernet 0/1. If you notice on the cables, there are these lights or symbols that represent the link lights you'd see on the equipment. It indicates a status. Green is good. Red is bad. Orange is a special condition related to the spanning tree protocol, and I'll be covering that more in depth in one of the switching videos. So now we want to assign IP addresses to each PC. You click on the PC and then go to the Desktop tab and click IP Configuration. We're going to give this first one an IP address of 192.168.0.1, and it needs a subnet mask also. So if you just hit Enter or the tab, it'll fill in the subnet mask with the default. And subnet masks are something we'll cover in an IP addressing video in the future. So each PC we want to give an IP address. Next one will be 192.168.0.2. Oh, missed a dot. Hit Enter, it'll give you the subnet mask. You can close the window. And we'll repeat it with the other 2 PCs using the IP addresses ending with .3 and .4. The time has come to beg for subscribers. Please remember to subscribe, click the notification bell to get all notifications, like, comment, and share this video. It really does make a difference. Thank you. Alright, so we are connected up. We've got all green link indications, so everything is connected. What we can do is ping from one PC to the other, and ping, it sends an echo request to the IP address you specify, and if you get a response, you know you've got a good connection between the two. So we'll open the PC, go to the desktop tab, then we want command prompt. From command prompt, type ping, P-I-N-G, and we'll ping the PC directly above it, which is 192.168.0.2. Hit enter. You should get 4 replies from it. It's possible to get the first reply timeout and then 3 replies, and that's normal depending on the network. So let's ping the other ones. I'll hit the up arrow, change that to a 3. So that one's good. And we'll do it again with .4. That one's good. It's probably pretty reasonable to assume we've got good connectivity both ways from all the PCs, so I'm going to stop there. Now let's click on this first switch, the one on the left. It should open with the CLI window open. And we're going to just click in the window. You can see up here it says press return to get started. All this below it is console logging messages. They're just system messages, and we'll handle those in a while. Hit enter, and you've got a command prompt with a greater than sign. That indicates you're in user exec mode. User exec is pretty limited. You can't do much from it. You can't make any configuration changes from there. You can't directly enter configuration mode from user exec. One thing I do want to show you here, though, is part of the help system. If you type a question mark, it'll show you the commands that are available. So we need to go into what is called privileged exec mode, and the command for that is enable. So we'll type enable and hit enter. And now see the prompt changed to an octothorpe or £, whatever you want to call it. That indicates you're in privileged exec mode, and that's basically the keys to the castle. You can get to configuration mode from there and do all the configuration. Now if we type question mark again, you'll see different commands. The help system is context sensitive, so it will only show you the commands that are valid where you are. The first thing we want to do is we want to change the host name of this switch. Right now, its host name is switch, and that's indicated by the command prompt. It says switch and then octothorpe. In order to do that, we need to enter configuration mode. So what command might that be? Oh, look, configure, enter configuration mode. If you execute a command that outputs a lot and you get the more at the bottom, you can either get to the end of it. If you hit the enter key, it'll go line by line. Space bar will scroll a whole page. Or you can simply hit Control-C and it will terminate the listing. So we want to go into configuration mode. We want to go configure. I'm going to type the first couple letters and hit a question mark right there. And it will show you the commands that start with those letters. So we've got configure, connect, and copy. Now if I type CON question mark, we've got 2 commands available. Now if I hit enter here, it says the command's ambiguous, and it is because there's more than one command that starts with CON. Now if I type CONF question mark, there's only one command starting with CONF, so we can abbreviate that command to conf. If you hit tab, it'll complete it. Now let's see if there's anything available. There is. We can configure from terminal, which is what we're going to do, or we can just hit enter. Enter will ask if we want to configure from terminal. And the word terminal in square brackets indicates that is the default. So we can hit enter there, and we're in the configuration mode. This is global configuration mode. Let's just exit out of that. Now we're back to privileged exec. So if we go back to conf space T and hit enter, configure terminal. There we go. You can abbreviate the command conf space T and hit enter. But on a certification test, they kind of want you to know the whole command. Abbreviating's fine, but know the command because it may come up as a multiple choice question and you might have to pick it out. So we're going to change the host name. If we look at the available commands, we can see in there host name, set systems network name, and that's a command we need. So I'm going to Control C to end that. Host name. Now it says word when you hit question mark. It means it wants a word. So you fill in what you want to use for the host name. And we'll give this a host name of bethepacket1. Hit enter, and the command prompt changes, reflecting the new host name. Configuration changes you make are updated and in use immediately. Alright, from this config mode, from global config, we can get to any other configuration mode in the system. I want to show you some of the basic security steps that we need to take. We are logged in right now through a simulated console port. In real life, you'd connect a cable from the serial port or USB port on a PC or laptop to the console port on the router. And that's what this would look like. By default, it's just open access. Anyone with physical access to the piece of equipment can connect a console port and be in it. So we want to configure this port so it requires a password to even get in. Now what we're going to do, we want to configure the port called line console 0. So from global config, if we type line space question mark, we can see some other lines down here, VTY and 0 through 16. The one we're concerned with right now is console. VTY is a telnet port, and we'll cover that in another video. So line console question mark. 0 is the only number available because there is only one console port on each piece of equipment. So line console 0, enter. The prompt changes and you see it says config line, so we now know we're in line configuration mode. In order to make it use a password, that command right here is login. Login enables password checking on the console port, and it will require a password, but there are 2 steps to this. So first, we'll execute the command login, and we'll see a message. Login disabled on line 0 until password is set. So you also need to set a password. And probably won't be much of a surprise, but the command to do that is password. So it wants the password we're going to use. We're going to enter it in clear text. We'll just use Cisco and hit enter. Now the console port is password protected. So if we go out of it, let's type end, enter. End will take you back to privileged exec from any config mode. Now if we type exit, we're out. So let's hit return and see if we can get back in. Okay, it prompts for a password, Cisco, and it works. And we'll go back to privileged exec. Now I want to show you what happens with the configuration file. We've just put a password in, so we want to show, and the file we want to look at is running config. Now this will show you the actual config running on the device currently. It's the same thing. To go through it line by line, you can hit enter, or you can use a space bar, and that'll advance a page at a time. Now we can see right here under line con 0 the password we just configured, and it is in clear text. Anyone looking over your shoulder can read it. So we need to change that, and we will in a little bit here. First, let's go ahead and configure a password to restrict access to configuration mode. So we want to configure this with an encrypted password. There are two ways to do it. One is plain text and the other one is encrypted. And I'm going to show you both. I do not recommend you ever use the plain text password for the enable password. The first one is enable password. I'm not in configuration mode. Let's get back into configuration mode. Config T. There we go. Enable password. And it wants a password there. We're not going to use Cisco for this one. We'll use switch. That will also be in the configuration file in plain text and human readable. The other method to set a password for config mode, enable secret. That gives it a stronger encryption by default. For that one, we'll use Cisco. We can't use the same password for the unencrypted and the encrypted. It'll conflict and it'll get an error message. And once you've set an enable secret, the other password is no longer valid. It will prefer the strongest one. But again, I really don't recommend using enable password. Always use enable secret. Let's take another look at the running config file, and I'll show you the difference. All right. So here you see enable secret 5. 5 is a type of encryption. 5 is a stronger encryption. It's technically a hash, but they call it encryption. And it uses the MD5 algorithm. We still see the other password. That one is no longer accepted because this one is set. Now let's go back down, page through it to the console. And even though we've encrypted with enable secret the configuration password, the console password is still in plain text. We can fix that too. Config T. And the way we do that is, let me scroll back up here and show you. At the beginning, you can see here it says no service password encryption. So there is a service to encrypt the passwords, but by default it's disabled, and we're going to enable that. And to do that, we do service, password encryption, enter. Now let's look at that file again. And let me show you a trick here. From any config mode, you can execute a privileged exec command by prefixing it with do. Okay, see our password here that was in plain text is now encrypted with a weak hashing algorithm. Where it says enable secret 5 and enable password 7, those numbers indicate the type of encryption that was used. 5 is the stronger one, 7 is the weaker one. Now let's go back down to our console, and you can see it also encrypted the password for the console. To disable a configuration command, you prefix it with no. So if I wanted to get rid of password encryption service, I would enter no service password encryption. However, that will not unencrypt passwords that are already encrypted. All right, let's log back out. And we'll go ahead and press return to log in again. Password Cisco. We want to go back into privileged exec, so enable, and it'll prompt us for a password. We set switch as the password that was in plain text originally. Does not take it. Now we set Cisco for the enable secret, and it does take that. That demonstrates it will not accept the password that was configured with enable password once you've configured enable secret. Let's go back into global config mode. All right, at the beginning of the video, I showed you those log messages that were on the screen, and those can pop up at the most inopportune times. If you're trying to read the contents of a long configuration file and a console message is generated or a log message is generated, it will pop up right smack in the middle of it. And if you've got an interface flapping up and down, it can generate a lot of messages. We can configure that so that the messages are held until a better time, like when you're done entering a command or after you've finished reading a file. So we want to go back into our console port, line con 0, and the command is logging synchronous. That changes the logging so that it's synchronous with what you're doing. Once you're done with what you're doing, then it'll display the messages. That will save you a lot of frustration working with Cisco equipment. Another thing that'll save you a lot of frustration is changing the session timeout on the console port. By default, it's only 5 minutes. So if you stop to read something or look up a command and it takes you 5 minutes, it'll log you out. You have to log back in and go back to what you're doing. The length of the session timeout can be changed. It has to be done in the port that you're configuring. So we're in config line and we know we're in console 0. And the command to change that is exec-timeout. Then you can see it wants a time. So timeout in minutes, let's give it a 30-minute timeout, and it will also accept as a parameter seconds. We don't need to enter seconds. We can if we want to. So timeout space 30 space 0 gives you a 30-minute timeout. Timeout 30 space 30 would give you 30.5 minutes, etc. Hit enter and it takes effect. Let's take another look at the running config file and see where that is. And it shows up right here where it should. Exec timeout 30.0. And we have our logging synchronous. So those two issues are taken care of. Let me go back to privileged exec. Now let's say I mistype a command, or I enter something that isn't a command. I can't use end from here, so let's see what happens. It's going to try to look that up. It thinks I am looking for another node on the network because end is not a valid command from privileged exec. The timeout on this is 60 seconds. It feels like 3 hours when you're in the middle of doing something. So we're going to disable that. There are instances where you would want to have it enabled. There are networks that use a domain name server, but this isn't one of them. If you're configuring a piece of equipment for a network that does use DNS, the network administrator will tell you and you'll configure it for the DNS server to look up. Okay, it finally timed out. So back into global config T, we want to disable what's called IP domain lookup. So we want to do a no IP. Let's see what's available there. There it is, right there, domain lookup. We want to disable that because it's a waste of time if we don't have a DNS server on the network. No IP domain dash lookup, enter. Now let's go back to privileged exec, type end again, and now it just tells us bad command. We've got our configuration pretty much where we want it for now, but what we haven't done is save it. The running configuration runs in RAM, which is random access memory. If we reboot the piece of equipment or if there's a power loss, it's gone. So we need to save this configuration somehow. And we're going to save it to NVRAM, which is non-volatile RAM. It keeps its contents if the machine's rebooted or if there's a power loss. And when it does start, that's where the system looks for a configuration file. It looks for a startup configuration in NVRAM. So the command to do that, there are a couple ways. This is the one Cisco wants to see. Copy running config space startup config. It is also the longest one, and that figures it's the one they want to see. If we hit enter, it prompts us with, do we want to use that file name? That's the default, and yeah, we do. So just hit enter again, and it'll write. We can show it's there with show startup config, just like we did with show running config. And right now they're identical because we haven't made any configuration changes since we changed it. There are a couple other commands that you can use to save the running config to the startup config. Write mem, or write memory, is one of them. It does it immediately and it puts it right into the default file. Write does the same thing. Let me erase the startup config, and I'll show you what happens when you try to view it and it doesn't exist. To delete a startup config file, write erase will get rid of it. Confirm, yes, gone. So now let's see what happens when we try to show it. Show startup config. Startup config is not present, so we'll save it again. Yep, save it in there, and it's there. Now if we do the same thing, show startup config, there it is again. We can reboot this now, and it will find the startup config file and load it, and it'll be just as it is now. So let's do that. From privileged exec, reload. Confirm, yes. And this is pretty much exactly what you would see with a physical piece of equipment. There it prompts us for our password, Cisco. Enable password Cisco, and we're in again. There is another command to delete the startup config. That is erase startup config. So we'll dump it again. Startup config not present. We'll save it. Done. Couple of quick tips. Let's say you're typing out a command. And you misspell something. I'll misspell interface. Oh, bad command. I don't have to retype it. If I hit the up arrow, it'll bring up the command. Control A will bring you back to the beginning of the line, and you can fix your typo. Oh, but wait, I want FA0/2. So Control E will bring you to the end of the line. Hopefully I've given you some useful information, and we'll be doing this configuration, probably all of these steps on every lab in the future. It's very common to do all these on any piece of equipment you're going to configure and install, so we may as well just get used to that and reinforce it. I've put together a packet tracer activity that you can use to practice this. What a packet tracer activity is, when you open it, it'll come up with a set of instructions, tell you what you need to do, and you do the configuration. It will check your work, and you can look at it at any time and it'll tell you what's complete and what isn't complete. You can go back and fix it. And it's really useful for learning. It helps you remember. I'll put a link to that in the description. I'll also put a link to the command reference for the commands that I've used in this video. I hope this has been informative for you and that I've presented information you find useful. Please do remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to get all notifications, and share this video.